All right, we're live here talking about AEW's Rampage show. Man, what a hot crowd, what a hot show, what a hot debut. I don't think, can you picture what they tried to do going any better than what happened, Paul?
Not really. I mean, I had ideas in my head of what would work, and this wasn't even close to what I had in my head. And it's still like, I can't imagine it being done any better.
All right, Parker, you watch you watch Dynamite and Rampage every week. You talk about it, you do podcasts about it, you write about it. CM Punk has been coming for weeks now. He debuted, they showed up. They're leading to a match with Darby Allin at the pay-per-view. Give me what you're thinking, man.
So, I don't know how much I've talked about this. CM Punk is my favorite wrestler of all time.
No way. I didn't know that.
Yes. He was, when I was younger, really what got me into wrestling. And then it just so happened to, he got super hot a couple years later with the Summer of Punk and all that. And so I'm ecstatic to have him back. I thought it was weird because you always kind of expect in wrestling, surprise is so like that. Companies always look for a big surprise, a way to shock people. And this went pretty much chalk as far as what we were expecting, or at least what I was expecting from CM Punk. So with that being said, it was exactly what it should have been. It was perfect. You couldn't have drawn it up any better. The crowd, one of the best crowd reactions of all time immediately. His promo was fantastic, which I'm sure we'll get into, but as a fan of CM Punk and of wrestling in general, like I just massive smile on my face. I was so happy to be watching the show.
Okay, so those of you who are listening to us, definitely send in your thoughts if you have some comments, if you have questions about what's going on. Definitely send those in, and we'll throw them on the screen as we get them. So I don't know if everybody caught this, but I'm going to do something really quickly just because this is the pop culture nerd in me, and I'm going to showcase a couple of screens here. Okay, before the show, or right when the show started, this is what we saw. There's a statement, a fake press release. The following statements were released today by CM Punk through AEW president and Tony Khan of All Elite Wrestling in response to questions about his future career plans. I'm back. So some people are like, oh, that's really cool. Why did CM Punk keep saying I'm back? Well, part of the plan here. March 18th, 1995, from David Falk. The following statement was released today by Michael Jordan through his personal attorney and business manager, David B. Falk, chairman of Falk Associates Management Enterprises, Inc., located in Washington, D.C., in response to questions about his future career plans. Michael Jordan said, I'm back. Okay. I feel stupid, and I'll tell you why. Paul and I, all of us, have been talking about how do you debut CM Punk on this show? Why aren't these guys promoting him coming back to AEW? We could have used Wednesday's Dynamite to talk about it. Let's bump up the rating for Rampage. And when I saw that press release, I was like, I feel dumb. Because when Michael Jordan came back to the NBA, here's what happened. He went to the Chicago Bulls practices and kind of practiced with the team, sort of felt his way through. No publicity, nothing. It was that press release as to how he came back. So that's what they were following. And I didn't get it until today, and I feel so stupid because I'm like the expert on everything Michael Jordan. So kudos to them for getting me, and that was a story. Okay, so let's talk about this promo, because this promo starts off the show. Now, actually, even before the promo, he comes out. The announcers come out. No, Chris Jericho. It was Jim Ross instead. I don't remember if they said why. Was it he was selling his elbow, or
they just said he took some time off to think about what he's going to do?
Okay. Yeah. So then CM Punk, the music plays. CM Punk comes out, and at first, only because I've been watching CM Punk for a very long time, all the crowd is really going crazy. He kind of like is soaking it in. And at first, again, because I've seen a lot of CM Punk, I thought he was like milking it, right? Like he was doing the Hogan thing. Like, he's like feeling like so, oh my gosh, I can't believe you guys are, doing this. And so then they'll cheer louder and louder and louder. That's not what he was doing. I think he was so touched that he had to kind of catch himself because this is his home crowd. These are his home fans. I think he expected a giant reaction. I don't know if that was what he expected. That was bigger than what I thought, and I thought it was going to be giant. I was trying to compare it to previous things like this. The one that I can compare it to is when Rock came back the first time to face John Cena. I remember a very extended pop like this, but I don't remember it being this loud. Am I misremembering that? What did you guys think? And Parker, I'll lead with you first.
Yeah, I can't remember anything that matched this in terms of reaction. In terms of what you're talking about with him, either milking the crowd or if he was just genuinely touched or whatever. Yeah, I completely got that too. He's hugging people in the front row. He did that leap into the front row, which was awesome. Very sports-like as well. So that was really cool. And there's just very little like it. Like, I think it shows the value that AEW has in creating not an antagonistic, relationship with their fans, but a relationship with their fans where their fans generally get what they want. They almost always deliver on what's expected, and people are rewarded, and the fans are rewarded for it with one of the biggest modern stars in professional wrestling history. And so I think when you combine all those together into CM Punk, the biggest now star in AEW history already, like that's just massive, and I think it all coalesced in this one moment. And then Chicago, of course, made it a big deal as well.
All right, Paul, you are somebody who pays attention to this stuff, reactions. Yeah. You pay attention to history. What did you think about that reaction, and what could you compare it to?
I mean, I hadn't thought about the Rock one, and that's a good one. I was immediately brought back to, because it was in the same city, and it was a similar situation in a way. Was Jericho's debut in WWE or WWF at the time, and where the fans all knew it was Jericho coming in, but they didn't announce that it was Jericho. So you had fans with crowd, signs in the crowd that said Jericho, Y2J, and all that. And he had been in WCW, and he had been held down, and he hadn't been able to be brought up to the mid card. So he had a lot of fans. Now, it wasn't anywhere near the level of CM Punk, but it was similar in that sense. Like, the storyline was the same. So at the time, WWF was kind of the underdog, in this war, although they were starting to turn the corner by that point, or they kind of had already. But when Jericho was in there and being held down, they were on top, and they were holding all the young guys down. And now, so this was similar, but I can't honestly, I mean, the Hogan one Hogan was milking it, but it was still real.
Right.
So, in that sense, like, I think it was 10 minutes in, and then for the converse side would be with Roman Reigns when he came out at that WrestleMania after he beat, was it Brock or the Undertaker or Brock? I can't remember, but whoever he beat, he just stood out there. Yeah. The Undertaker. Yeah. He didn't say a word, and he just melted it in, but that was legit the opposite heat. So, I like I said, though, I mean, it was totally genuine, though. There's no way you could think that he had any other intention in mind. And I don't even think, like, he said that he didn't plan a promo, and I tend to believe him. Like, just, he spoke from the heart. I'm sure he had some things he wanted to say, but, it was more like a bullet point.
Okay, so let's actually get to the promo. So I wrote a lot of it down. I didn't write everything down. I thought there were some really interesting things that he said. I think the first thing that kind of resonated with me is he mentioned that he wasn't ever going to get better staying in the same place that got him sick. That was a really interesting line, because when it comes to the chance about is CM Punk coming back, do we want him to, is WWE going to bring him back? He's basically telling us there was no way, because he felt cured from whatever his ailment was in WWE, that was I think some people will take it as a shot, and maybe it was even meant to be a shot. He didn't mention WWE one time, but there were like little subtle hints about WWE. But what did you think of that, Parker, when he was talking about like the sickness and not, feeling like he could never go back because that's the place that made him sick?
Well, that felt legitimate to me. I mean, for somebody like him at the top of his game, I'm a big star to leave wrestling and not come back for that long, despite all I'm sure WWE would have, driven up the Brinks truck for him and all that type of stuff and given him everything they possibly could to get him to wrestle for them. It just never happened. And that doesn't happen when people are at the top of their game. They don't just leave wrestling, especially of all things. Like nobody retires in wrestling. And it seemed like CM Punk did legitimately retire from wrestling, and I'm sure until he really started getting into these discussions with AEW, he never really planned to get back to wrestling. So I thought the shots were like perfectly measured. I didn't think they were like petty or overt to the point where it took away from the focus, but I also think they were substantial enough to get over the point of this is how serious it was for AEW, for me to come back to AEW. It's such a positive situation that I had to come. And then one thing I want to mention quickly, the very first thing he says is you guys know how to make a guy feel like Britt Baker in Pittsburgh.
That was a good line.
Which I did appreciate. I like that line. It already kind of places him in the universe, right, of AEW. It puts over one of their top stars huge. To get the mention there in one of the immediately most iconic promos of the last decade. So I thought all of that was really effective.
Okay, we're gonna cut. We'll come back to this promo because we have somebody who's actually live at the arena, and we're gonna bring him on here in a second to join us. JD, what's up, man? Oh, we can't hear you. I think there's something going on with your.
I'll translate. He said, "What's up, guys?"
There you go.
I did say, "What's up, guys?" Sorry, I was on mute. My head is pounding right now. I got to be honest with you guys. Like the arena, was like shaking. I heard Paul talking about the Jericho debut. I was lucky enough to get to be in the arena for that one too. And my friend and I went to the same show together. 22 years ago. We were like, this just blew this out of the water as far as like a reaction. Like. I filmed the whole thing. I just knew they were going to start with it. And I'm really glad I did. And I've never seen a crowd react like this before. I've never seen such unison joy in one place at one time. It's freaking cool. I can't think of another word to describe it. It was unreal.
How was the ice cream bar?
Damn good. Yeah. I ate it on the way back to my car. You best believe I was getting a free ice cream bar. I was shocked they actually did it. It was really good. It was actually some place that makes them here in Chicago. It was just a regular. It was different. I thought they were gonna do like a WWE one with a cookie. No, it was just like a chocolate dipped ice cream bar. It was awesome.
Sweet. Okay, so I have a couple questions for you, and then we're gonna let you go because I know you're driving or you're kind of doing some stuff. But okay, so. So you had actually gone away from being a pro wrestling fan. You stepped away from watching pro wrestling. Something brought you back. Did you get to see a lot of Punk's WWE run?
I'm a little because Punk's from one of the neighboring towns for me, so I've always kind of known of him. So I was always interested in what he was doing specifically. Like I remember we had a WrestleMania party, and I checked out the one where he won the back. So I was all good. Oh boy, makes good. When the pipe bomb was big, I remember on Twitter it blew up, and I started following it a little bit again. For years he was the only wrestler I followed on Twitter, and I got really excited about prospects, and I started watching again. And then after SummerSlam, I was like, "Oh, okay, I'm done." So I checked out for a couple years. So this was Punk, a guy that I really followed for a long time, and I never thought this would happen, but I'm really glad it did.
Okay, your phone is breaking up a little bit, so I have one more question, and then we'll let you go. And I really appreciate you coming on. So, All Out is, I mean, I know it's not right next to the United Center. I know there's a little bit of a different ways, but Are you going to that show? And if the answer before was no, like now, do you sort of feel like, how do I get there? Like, was Punk's debut that meaningful to where you're like, oh man, now I need to get to see this show?
I had my all-out tickets. I bought them with the pre-sale.
Okay.
Not only that, I'm going to Milwaukee on Wednesday.
Okay, so you're in.
I've had those tickets for a while. Someone's knocking my door. Guys, I'm gonna let you guys go. So okay. I gotta go.
All right, man. Thanks. All right, that was JD Oliva. If folks didn't know, JD is on our Patreon. He does a couple different shows on the Patreon. So really appreciate JD coming on. And okay, Paul, so I can come back to you now about CM Punk's promo. So he did one of the like classic pro wrestling things where he's wearing this zipped up hoodie and he's like, oh man, it's hot in here. And he unzips the hoodie and he's got the brand new t-shirt. And from what I understand, I saw some photos. Some people had tweeted some photos. It looks like the second that shirt was on sale, like the line went around the building and people weren't able to get back to their seats. So how brilliant was that? Like, it's easy, but like so amazing.
I mean, he had this crowd in the palm of his hands, and like, yeah, I mean, it was a no-brainer. And I was wondering that too. Like, were they selling them before? Were people? I thought I saw somebody in the front row wearing one. But I mean, it was just brilliant, and you kind of knew, right from the time he came out. I just, Parker mentioned the line about Britsburg, and that's what got me. Like, it was like, yeah, he's been following. Obviously, he's been watching the shows. He made a lot of references that showed that he knows what's going on.
Yeah,
and he also, I love the way that he tied the lineage of AEW, as opposed to, like, they've been trying to kind of position them as the second coming of WCW, like, Nitro, and then TNT is Dynamite now, whereas he's kind of tying it back to Ring of Honor, and that's what AEW wouldn't be here if it's not for Ring of Honor. Is almost, I kind of got what he's saying.
Yeah,
and where these guys got a major stage now, where all those guys back in 2005 when he had to leave, as he put it, he would have loved to have gone to a place like this as opposed to where he went.
So Ryan Frederick, of course, Ryan Frederick has the news for us. So Ryan Frederick just put in our comments that he did a scrum and said that he's not a part-time player. So with this schedule, and we see someone like Mox who's a full-time guy, but Mox wrestles only maybe twice a month or whatever. So this formula of what AEW is doing can be advantageous to some of these guys. Now, it could be a little bit of a negative to guys like Jungle Boy, to some of the women who need those reps and unfortunately can't get them because you're just not running as many shows. But let's bring up another name. We just saw the Punk debut. That bodes well for Daniel Bryan, if Daniel Bryan is coming in, and other folks, who maybe are overexposed with the WWE model of, we have 5 hours of TV, so we need to get all the stars on every single show. And I just think that's an interesting piece to this, because it is absolutely 100% has to be part of his decision to come back to AEW, right? I can't do that old schedule. Maybe that old schedule was part of what made him sick. Now I can do this schedule because I don't have to wrestle as often.
Yeah, I definitely feel like that's the case. There's such a bad, I think the idea that somebody's like part-time leaves such a bad taste in people's mouths. And luckily, the way, like you said, AEW structures their shows and their build, these guys essentially are part-time, a lot of the top guys. So it works out just fine for people like Punk. Like Sting doesn't really wrestle that much more than he did in his WWE run or whatever. He's not like as exposed, but he still feels like a regular, full-time roster member, and it's all based on the presentation and the fact that they don't have a million hours of TV every week, and they don't run rematches ever. And so, yeah.
I think Sting has been on TV every single week since he debuted, except for one. So, I mean, if Punk can do that, I mean, and only wrestle a handful of times, I mean, he could do this for 15 years if he wants.
So I just want the people watching.
Yeah.
When I look, it looks like I'm looking away from Parker and Paul. I'm actually looking towards the comments. So I'm putting up comments. So I'm not disinterested in what Parker and Paul is talking about. I can hear them. I can see them, but I'm actually also looking at comments. So just in case. Okay. So we get to the end of this promo. As you said, he made the ROH reference. He basically said, when I left ROH, I left pro wrestling, but now I'm back in pro wrestling. He mentioned the young talent. He mentioned that he's got some scores to settle, called out Darby Allin, said nothing that Darby Allin could do would be as dangerous as wrestling CM Punk, especially in Chicago at All Out. So that match is made. That's going to be the first match for Punk. I'm assuming. I don't think he's going to wrestle on Dynamite or Rampage before then. And then he said, as a gift for all the fans who've been waiting for him for these 7 years, he gave out 3 ice cream bars, which JD showed us. Perfect. It was just perfect. Like, so.
One thing you didn't mention was when the promo started, when he sat down in the exact same position as when he did the pipe bomb promo. That was awesome.
Yeah, and then they popped like crazy.
Yeah,
I might be giving away some news here.
Uh-oh.
Let's hold on for 2 seconds. Take a deep breath. Big Dave isn't watching this show live. He wasn't. I don't know if anybody knew that. He and I we're not recording tonight. We recorded something with Mick Foley for tomorrow, and we're recording more tomorrow about Dominic Nanucci. But Dave is not home, so I'm watching this show. And he texted me. He's like, so how'd it go? I'm like slamming on my thing and sending him every possible thing. Cause like, it's Dave. Like, I need to give him as much information as possible. So Dave was not watching. I think people were kind of frustrated that we weren't doing a show tonight because they wanted to hear his immediate reaction to what happened. And I'm like, guys, Dave has a life. Like, sometimes, we can't be at our computer. And here we are at our computer. So, okay. So, let's actually talk about the rest of this show. Everything was fine, but after that high peak, so early, everything just sort of fell into place. We had a Christian promo with the Jurassic Express. And my first thought was, hey, I thought Christian was at Impact today. So obviously one of those is taped, but this is his Lex Luger, Rick Rude moment. He's at two places in one time. We had Private Party and Jurassic Express. So my thought, and when Paul and I talked on my podcast, the Fight Game podcast on Wrestling Observer, we had talked about, okay, what's next for the Jurassic Express? They came so close to winning that match on Dynamite against the Young Bucks. It was a really good match. Now, what do you do? Because there was so much interference. There's this tournament, the tournament finale, the winner of the tournament gets to face the Bucks. It's going to be in a cage, maybe to stop all of this interference. I thought, well, does that mean Jurassic Express is going to win the tag titles? We've been waiting for Jungle Boy to go to that next level, right? This seems like a natural progression of what he does. Now, Parker, I'll start with you. Did this match, the way that they beat Private Party, pretty good match, though a lot of it was in picture-in-picture. Most of the heat was in picture-in-picture, so that kind of killed it a little bit for me. But do you sense that we are possibly leaning towards something here with Jurassic Express after what you saw Wednesday and what you saw tonight?
Yeah, I'm not sure. It's tough because AEW never does rematches, like under any circumstance, especially if it's a failed challenge, right, of a championship. Now, of course, you would think in like kayfabe logic that even that with a ton of interference, like there was in the Wednesday match, then you get one in a steel cage, and that's like fine, especially if they win 2 matches to get there. When they announced the tournament, my first thought was the Lucha Bros were winning because that's
what I had assumed before I saw what happened on Wednesday.
And tonight, I kind of assumed Private Party was winning, actually, because not that they're bigger stars than Jurassic Express, because they're not. But I think you generally want a face heel dynamic for that tournament final. and Jurassic Express just got a shot. And I just never really expected that Jurassic Express would win this tournament. But now that they've won and they're making it to the finals, I mean, it feels like a real toss-up to me. And whoever ends up making it to that steel cage match, I do think they will beat the Young Bucks, whoever wins the cage match. That is logical booking to me. Now, whether that is Jurassic Express or the Lucha Bros, I'm really not sure.
Who's hotter? Who do you think is hotter?
Well, the Lucha Bros aren't hot like at all as an act right now, but they're also the type of act that it takes a week to heat them up. Like, you know what I mean? And
a hot match and they're back over.
Mm-hmm. AEW originals, right? And so Jungle Boy is the hottest individual out of the four individuals out of those four. But in terms of the match, like, it's going to be a big moment no matter who gets that victory.
All right, this is a giant compliment from Matthew. Thank you very much, Matthew.
Awesome.
What's funny is, like, I listen to all of those shows, and so that really means a lot to me. I do have a question for Paul, and I'll get Paul. I do want to get your thoughts on. We have a question from the comments to Paul. I want to get your comments about the Lucha Bros and Jurassic Express in a second. But from the same Matthew, he says, what do you predict the rating is going to be? And will the first to second segment be the biggest segment ratings drop in AEW?
I think, you know what? I'm going to say no to that second part, because there was that huge drop they had when they had the NBA lead-in, and it was an MJF match. I remember that, and it lost like something like 250,000 viewers. So I don't think this will do that. But it's possible. As far as what the rating will be, I had kind of gone in thinking it was going to do just a little bit less than what last week did. Like maybe 700 to 720, something in there, and maybe like a 0.31, or sorry, 0.3, 0.29, something like that. But the way they did this show, and the fact that they kept Punk out there for like 20 minutes at the beginning of the show, I think it might have that whole like, hey, you know what, turn the channel, Punk's on, especially right after SmackDown ended. So I think it's going to do a little better than what Rampage did, or what Rampage did last week, I should say. I'm going to go with 800,000 and like a 0.35. I don't think it's going to hit 1 million, but I've been wrong many, many times.
All right, I already told Paul this.
Yeah.
More news. Not really news. I did ask Dave what he thought about the number, and he predicted 1 million. I was actually surprised that he predicted 1 million, but then I sort of, I've been talking to some people, and they're like, "Oh, my friend who hasn't watched wrestling decided to get a subscription to Sling so he could watch AEW tonight." Like, I heard a few of those today, and that may just be my own friend circle, but that's really interesting if, Punk is actually driving people to watch this product, which is why you bring him on. So that's very interesting to hear from folks. Okay, so I want you to you and I talked about this on Wednesday.
Yeah.
What are they doing with the tag teams here based off of what you saw Wednesday, what you saw today? Any change in your thoughts?
So what I think is, I disagree with Parker about Jungle Boy being hot. But that's another question for another
We did
time.
see some jungle crack on this show.
We did. And Mark Henry drew attention to it, which was funny. Mark Henry was better tonight.
I like him.
He's in small doses, especially in that side-by-side interview. But in terms of the tag team titles, I think it's going to come down to Lucha Brothers and Jurassic Express. And I think that if the Lucha Brothers win, then they're going to lose the cage match. But if the Jurassic Express win, they almost have to win at this point. Like, Jungle Boy can't lose again in a big match. I just, if they have any plans for him, like, and never say never, but I just feel like it's too soon for him to lose again, especially like Parker said. I mean, they just lost a couple weeks ago or last week, and for them to lose twice in a row, it's like it almost kills them for a while, like not forever. But so I think the Lucha Brothers, if they do like a 5-star match that Parker will say is 4.5, then they and that's all that's going to matter. They can lose. It doesn't matter. But I think the Jurassic Express needs to win if they are in the finals.
So my podcast partner, who Paul's been filling in for here of late, John the Rocka, he basically said the same thing as you. He's like, they can't be lovable losers. Like, nobody likes lovable losers, And so I agree with you. I think they need to do it. The problem is, how long do they hold the titles? And because, essentially from what we've seen so far, title reigns have been, they've been extended. They haven't been short. They haven't been, more like a WWE title run with some of the, the tag belts or something. So it'll be interesting to see that. Babyface tag team champions also is an interesting thing. They kind of like the heels having the belts, or at least right now they do. I just wanted to show this from Jeremy. If we get enough people who are sending comments like this, I will have to get a producer to figure this out, because it is a little bit difficult. Okay, so now let's go to the next segment, which is near and dear to my heart. And I don't buy too many wrestling shirts. Like, I have like 3 or 4. I might have to buy a Jade Cargill wrestling shirt. She's a beast. I mean, look, she didn't do much. She didn't do a ton. It was she sold a couple of things, and then she did her power spot, and she was done. I'm such a giant Jade Cargill fan. You guys know this because you've been following me in the group, and I just find her to be so photogenic. I find her to be a very interesting Instagram follow. I went back and sort of saw her progression I don't even know what she was doing before, but into what she is now. I would worry a little bit about her booking, because she does lots of short video package interview segments and not a lot of wrestling. I want to see her wrestling more, but I also understand they don't have a giant roster for her to just run through women. But, we need to see some of these local women just get fed to Jade. I feel like that would get over. Maybe Rampage is the show to do it, but you only have three matches on Rampage. So I want to see more of it. What did you think of the Kiera Hogan and Jade thing, Parker?
Yeah, it was exactly what it should have been. I think there's definite like Goldberg potential, not obviously quite to the heights that Goldberg got in WCW, but if they essentially run that back here with Cargill, I think if she makes her squashes a little bit more dynamic, if she's whatever the mustache, I lost it, man. I can't be student teaching with a mustache.
You lost to loser leaves. Loses his hair match.
I faced Psycho Clown at Triple Mania. If her squash matches were a little bit more dynamic, I think if she like, I don't want to say if she was dangerous or something like that, but Goldberg was dangerous, right?
Yes.
And if she was maybe a little bit more violent in those, then I think they would get really over, and she could build to the stuff that the crowd really gets into. And now that with this extra hour of TV every week, there's way more of an opportunity to get her TV time, because Paul and I have said over and over on our pod, she's like as much of a can't miss prospect for the women's division as at least I've ever seen. And I know Paul has said similar things. So I enjoy this segment, and I hope they also pick up Kiera Hogan as well. I think she's talented.
So before we get to the I'll follow up with you, Paul. The podcast that you mentioned is on our Patreon. So every Wednesday night, when did you guys even start that? I can't remember how many you guys have done now. But at some point March? We had, so
say last week of February, first week of March.
It's like 6 months already.
Yeah.
So Parker and Paul, after every AEW Dynamite, they recap the show. A lot of times we have that show up before the West Coast episode is even done. So it's a pretty quick. Parker has quite a day on Dynamite Day. He recaps for F4W Wrestling Observer. So he's writing that recap in real time. Done with that, publishes that, sends it over to the crew to I don't know if they even edit it from there. But then he writes an article for Fight Game Media, which is basically like what he thought was good and what he didn't quite think was good, kind of what John and I do on the podcast. And then he and Paul record the Dynamite show. So Parker's entire Wednesday night is about AEW Dynamite. And then Paul has done double duty because he's been with me on the Fight Game podcast on F4W as well of late, subbing for John. So lots of stuff and great takes. I know the Facebook group that we have for the Fight Game podcast, they really love the show. It is, I would say, I feel like John and I do a show where we kind of get in trouble a little bit because we're not 100% positive on Dynamite. You guys are less negative than John is because John was brought up with a certain type of wrestling and he with a booking mind of certain type of wrestling. But you guys are also very fair to the things that are good and bad about that show. And so, if people who listen to the Fight Game podcast, Parker and Paul's podcast is also very fair. It's not just an AEW cheerleading session, which is what you hear because a lot of people love this show and I get it. But you guys can actually look at it more from a point of view of like, okay, let's balance this thing out.
It's funny because Parker actually takes heat for like not liking it, and when it started, it was the other way around. Like everyone was waiting to hear how I was going to slam it, and it's kind of gone full circle in the 6 months.
All right, let me get your take on Jade. What'd you think?
Well, like Parker said, I mean, we've been high on her on the pod. Parker, I think, even went so far as to say he thought she had the biggest star potential of anybody at all in AEW. Like, yeah, I think is what you said. And I didn't want to go quite that far. I'm more of a wait and see. I think the way I said was, I think she could be the biggest star in that company, but it won't be in that company. Like it'll be doing something else, but that company won't got her there. This was a perfect, like showcase for her on a show that a lot of people are going to watch. And, and they tried to sell you that Kiera Hogan had a chance. They even referenced the Fuego del Sol thing. And then it was just basically a squash, which is what it should have been. And I made the call, like when Britt Baker won the title, like Jade is going to be the one to take it from her. So I still think that's the case. And it's just a matter of getting Jade ready for a match like that and just keeping Britt hot long enough to get there. But I do think like she's 11-0 now, and somehow she's not in the top 5. That was the one question I had on this show. But I don't even care about the rankings anymore. But it was kind of funny that you see these other records, and sometimes they're like 7-2, and they're like number 4, and she's 11-0. But yeah. But yeah, no, I very impressed, obviously, and I was happy to see her wrestle because I've been asking for it for a while.
Jordan had a very nice comment. Thank you very much, Jordan.
Oh, thank you, Jordan.
Appreciate awesome. It.
I'm definitely gonna have to figure out something here because there's way more comments than I anticipated. That's a good thing, though, right?
Jordan's a great Twitter follow, by the way, for anybody watching.
What is it? Do you know his handle off the top of your head?
I think it's at Jordan Patu, but I recognize his name.
Okay,
he's got the Michael Jordan jersey.
We have a lot of
that's sweet.
We have a lot of my Twitter followers here. I'm very thankful for all of you. Yeah, just Jordan_Patu for him. Yeah. But yeah. So thank you everybody for listening.
I think he's a UFC fan too. So
yeah, he gets on the broadcast like you do.
Yeah.
That's why we brought Parker on, because we wanted to get all of his hardcore wrestling fan Twitter followers to listen to our stuff and watch our stuff.
And now all they want to talk about is Joshi.
Yes, another podcast that Parker does on our network.
Where was Riho on
the 5-star Joshi show?
I don't know. Riho's gone.
She got ill, right?
Yeah, she did get sick. That's fair.
Was it from the vaccine she got ill from?
Yeah, she had like side effects from her second dose. I think but that was a couple weeks ago now. I think she's probably doing better at this point.
I feel like I've seen more issues with that with some of the Japanese wrestlers. I wonder what the deal is.
I think that they don't take vaccines as a general rule, so their bodies might not be as...
Got it.
Because I took the flu vaccine for the first time last year, and I had a really bad reaction, and then I had a really bad one for my first COVID one too. So I think that might have something to do with it, just from personal experience.
Okay, so we had the Mark Henry interviewing Daniel Garcia, and John Moxley 2.0 was with Daniel Garcia. Like you guys said, or like somebody said earlier, Mark Henry was much better. And I did not come out of last week's Rampage thinking that Mark Henry needed to be replaced. I think he's actually better in this role, in this interview role that they have him. But I did like him on this show. I think in the main event, he said something like, what did he say about Christmas? Like, Christmas isn't coming this year, or Christmas is canceled this year or something for Daniel Garcia after he took a big shot. Like, I thought that was really funny. And if they could get more of that from Mark Henry to go along with, the craziness of Excalibur and I don't think JR fits with the 4 people, unfortunately.
I think he was just there because he wanted to be there for Punk.
Sure. And he was also there because he could call back to memories of these, of big moments like this, which is what he should be doing. Taz, for whatever reason, I didn't really hear Taz as much. So they do the interview. Moxley just says he's about to commit felony assault. Daniel Garcia has a better chance to get him pregnant than to submit him. And then he just walked off. I was like, drop the mic, John Moxley. What a promo, that dude.
I wanted to say I loved the way they did the setup for the main event, and I hope this becomes like a staple on Rampage with Henry really doing the split screen, and then even where he said it's time for the main event. Like that would be like a great kind of catchphrase kind of moment.
Yeah.
And he delivered it really well, and I hope they keep doing that. Absolutely.
Okay, so now we get to the main event, and my question is because some of the, when we get super nerdy about this stuff, we were thinking, how much is Moxley going to give Daniel Garcia in this match? Our buddy Brady, everybody knows Brady, who's in our group for good and bad. Shout out to Brady. I
was thinking about him watching this match, the whole match.
Brady said, what did he say? He thought Moxley was going to give Garcia. He had a number. It was like 60% or 70% or something. And I thought it would be maybe like 60-40 Moxley. I don't even know what it was. I wasn't counting. I wasn't paying attention too much, but it was a smart match because, and goes back to Dynamite, right? I was kind of wondering, like, what the hell? Like, why do Moxley and Kingston come out for 10 seconds and then you don't see him again until Moxley's interview? Well, the reason is because he was going to do this match with Garcia. And the whole reason for Garcia being on the offense was because Moxley was selling the injury from Monday. He hit him with a pipe. They even mentioned it. Tanya Harding him. And so that made a whole lot of sense and was the reason why Garcia got so much offense. And the offense wasn't shitty heel offense. It was like, I have an opportunity. I need to grab a leg. I need to put him in a submission. I need to be really quick because John Moxley's going to be really hard to beat. It was not to say, not to say it's like an MMA match, but like the mentality, the thought behind it was like if you were in a fight and you were fighting someone who was better than you, you're like, this person has one weakness. I need to attack that weakness as quickly as possible and as much as possible because if I don't, then I'm probably going to get squashed in this match. So I thought that was really, really smart. Parker, give me your thoughts on this main event.
Really happy to see Daniel Garcia in such a big spot. Anybody who's watched him, he's really only come on in the last year or so in terms of like getting a high profile position on the indies. So to see him in the main event of one of the biggest AEW shows in history was really good to see. He's a super in-ring talent, really, really engaging between the ropes. When the match started, it started at 53 of the hour, so you knew it wasn't going to go super long. The only thing that I think took away from it was, again, wrestling fans, kind of like I brought up earlier, are so conditioned to expect surprises, especially on big shows, and especially when things are so flexible and there's the Forbidden Door and all that type of stuff going on right now. And I think people were kind of hoping that CM Punk was not a surprise tonight. And so I think people were kind of hoping that there is some kind of surprise. We got Jamie Hayter last week. Somebody comes in after this main event and challenges Moxley because we don't know what Moxley's doing at the pay-per-view. So I think because of that, maybe the fans didn't get quite as into it as they would have normally. But at the same time, we got the Sting and Darby Allin run in. There was the post-match beatdown, which they do a million times and I'm kind of tired of. But at the same time, it wasn't a post-match beatdown and then heat to end the show. The babyfaces ran out, got the advantage, and it was just 4 massive superstars who everybody loves, like just kind of being cool to close the show. And it really felt like, Sting, Darby Allin, Eddie Kingston, and John Moxley is such an esoteric mix of characters that this is really... Brian Alvarez made this point on his pod that came out today. AEW often feels like a party. And tonight,
and that's what Nitro felt like for Parker wouldn't know Nitro because Parker was barely.
That's what I was saying in our
Parker. Were you weren't even born for Nitro? Were you?
I was 5 when Nitro went off the air.
But 1995 when it debuted, you were not alive.
I was born in December 95. Yeah.
Oh my God.
I said that to you in a text today, Garrett. I said I would go to Dynamite every week if I could, because it looks like so much fun.
Yeah, just a ton of fun.
As long as nobody had the Rona there, because there was a lot of non-masked up people.
It's true.
Okay. So Paul, actually, I wanted to show this one comment from our buddy Chris, who helps me out on the Karate Kid podcast. and so, unfortunately, this is true, but I will say, so the Riho figure, and for those, I'm also putting this on the audio side. So unfortunately, this is not a great audio podcast because we're putting comments and we're talking about comments that people who listen on the audio can't actually hear. But Chris De Petrillo says Riho can be found on the pegs of your local Target and Walmart toy department. Now, she it's the easiest to get AEW figure if you go to the store, but I did give it. So I had a few, and she's the one left over. And I asked my stepdaughter, I'm like, oh, what do you think? This figure. She's like, oh, she's pretty. And so she started taking her out, and she played with the hands. But Riho has to stay in my office. Riho cannot interact with her dolls and toys in her room. If she comes into my office, she'll grab Riho, she'll pose Riho and do all that stuff. But then she leaves her here, so she can't.
It's like Dynamite. She's separated from Dynamite every week. Yeah.
Okay, Paul. Thoughts on the main event before we get out of here?
Yeah. So I thought it was going to be a squash, and it wasn't quite that, but I've made the comment, like on the show with Parker before, like when we have these matches that I'm expecting a squash and I really want to see a squash, I'm often disappointed when the underdog gets some offense. And that wasn't the case here. Like I don't really know Danny Garcia at all, other than what I've seen on Dynamite. And I watched this match and I believed everything. Nothing that I saw looked like it was Moxley just trying to give him something. Like even in the Nick Camarado match, it looked like Moxley was deliberately trying to put this guy over. Whereas here, it looked like Moxley was trying to beat his ass.
Yes.
And Danny Garcia just kept trying to get out of it, which I thought was great. Like it actually did more for Danny Garcia, than it did for Moxley in a way. The one thing I thought was interesting was Danny Garcia put on the Scorpion Deathlock. And then we saw Sting a little bit later. So I don't know if there's something happening there. Like Parker talked about a surprise. And I think the fans even were chanting for Punk at the end because Darby was out there and he's facing Darby. So maybe Punk's going to come in, and what is he going to be with Garcia in 2.0? That's kind of a weird stable. But, and thankfully that didn't happen. But I was just like, I think there's something going on there that is going to make sense. Because Moxley is a big star and it's 2 weeks away and he doesn't have a match yet. So I think there's some puzzle pieces out there that just need to be put together, and we're going to get there and it'll be great.
So one thing I wanted to mention is I thought it was interesting. Punk starts off the show. He calls out Darby at the very end of his segment. Darby's coffin, his coffin drop closes the show. So that was kind of cool because they really promoted that match for All Out. At the beginning, the end, I called it the grand opening, grand closing Jay-Z line there. So I thought that was a really good opening and closing. Okay, so we're going to end the show in a second here, but I wanted to post some of the comments that Ryan Frederick has been tweeting or has been commenting on in our feed here about Punk. So he's just kind of putting some of these comments in here from Punk's little post game show. He's talking about AEW. It's just more about the spirit of the thing. Instead of feeling like a house, it felt like a home. It's the best way I can possibly describe it. Let me scroll a little bit more. I think if I was a wrestler and I saw Darby Allin, he would be my favorite wrestler. I'm obsessed with his dive. I don't want to take it. It looks painful. Let's see. I think there's a couple more here. Ryan Frederick said, Punk said, everything I do needs to be about giving back. This isn't about me trying to worry about my wins and losses or anything about that. It's about me having fun and working with the right people I can have fun with. And I think this is the last one. He says, I don't think I've ever hated professional wrestling. There needs to be a real distinction made about what I despised. It wasn't professional wrestling. So another shot at WWE there, but he's been very consistent about that that was his problem. That was his situation. That's why he was not wrestling. It's not about wrestling. It was about where he worked. And, that's his opinion. He has the freedom to say that. All right. So we are going to end it here. I want to appreciate, I think this was the most people that we've had watching live. We're a very small channel still. And the most comments that we've had for sure. Parker, I think you're a draw, Parker.
Second to Punk, maybe.
Paul, you've been so great of late, doing so much stuff. You helped me on Fight Game Podcast a couple times. You do your own podcast on the Patreon, and then we even did a ratings video yesterday on our YouTube channel. So if you want to see Paul explain ratings, and we kind of look at his spreadsheets and stuff, it's in our YouTube feed. So thanks to everybody for checking it out, and to people listening in the feed, the podcast feed. I am Double G for Parker and Paul. We will see you when we see you. Peace out.
Later.